After just a few days in the Dominican Republic, I took a direct flight from Santo Domingo to Santiago de Cuba. Here I stayed at the hostel El Mirador. This is what is known as a casa particular, which is a private house with one or more rooms to let. This is the norm in Cuba, and you rarely stay at what you would call a proper hotel. On my first evening, I realised just how spectacular the sunset could be from the balcony outside my room, over the bay and the distant hills. For comparison, this is more or less the same view next morning. This is Cuba's cultural capital, full of attractive old colonial buildings, especially in the centre, near where I was staying. This city was the launch site for Fidel Castro's revolution, and not surprisingly, this is depicted on panels in the main square. My next destination was Baracoa. Through the desert scenery around Guantanamo with its cactus plants, then winding up through forested green hills. As in Santiago de Cuba, in Baracoa I stayed at a very pleasant casa particular. The oldest town in Cuba, it's full of beguiling and beautifully painted old colonial buildings. Just roaming around for a few hours, soaking up the atmosphere, is a pleasure in itself. This is one of the horse buses. I needed a break, so here comes my lunch. Walking along the beach nearby, I found these blue-tailed lizards. Each island in the Caribbean area often has its own species or subspecies of these blue-tailed lizards. Further along, among the mangrove trees, hordes of fiddler crabs had come out to feed on the mud. Only the males have one of their front claws grotesquely enlarged like this, and constantly wave them around. See how the other tiny front claw is used to feed mud containing tiny particles of food into the crab's mouth. I was trying to get to a small forested nature reserve, and to get there I had to take this ferry across a small river. The reserve was privately owned, and there was a small entry fee, payable here where cold drinks were also available. In 2016, Hurricane Matthew devastated this area, felling many of the palm trees. The fallen trunks are now being colonised by abundant bracket fungi. The forest was unusually dry, and this silver emperor was one of the few butterflies I saw. You can imagine how delighted I was to be able to film Parides gundlachianus, a butterfly which is only found in Cuba and nowhere else in the world. What's more, these were beautiful newly hatched specimens. Whenever it moves, this lizard invitedly waggles its tail around. This attracts the attention of the predator to grab the tail and leave the lizard to run away unharmed, apart from the fact that it can lose its tail quite happily. Despite the ongoing drought, I was fortunate to find some of the colourful snails which are endemic to Cuba. On the way back to Santiago de Cuba, we found that private enterprise is still alive and well in Cuba. I got back to Santiago with just about 20 minutes to spare to catch the overnight bus to the old colonial city of Trinidad. Trinidad is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the streets are full of tourists just walking around, admiring the old buildings and soaking up the atmosphere. The cobbled streets certainly look quaint, but an exercise in torture for your suspension. This is a typical Cuban bus about to take me on to my next stop, Playa Girón, along the coast. Here, as usual, I stayed in a Casa Particular. This is the kind of breakfast that a place like this normally serves up for $5. The coast here is bordered by extensive areas of dry forest in which live millions of beautifully coloured crabs. Normally at this time of the year it would still be dry and they will be hidden underground in their holes, but I got really lucky on this occasion because there had been a recent heavy rain, and this had been enough to encourage at least some of the crabs to come out of their holes and become active. The sexes are easy to tell apart. The females are bright orange. This one is digging out its hole. The males are bluish black with abundant red on their legs. Inside the forest, the coral limestone is crawling with them. Here you see a male and a female together, showing a very different coloration. Generally speaking, there's a distinct lack of aggression between the males, as seen here with one large male and a small one. The males and females are mixing together all the time, so I'm not quite sure how this pair ended up mating. I didn't see any signs of courtship. Sometimes the male gets it wrong and attempts to mate with another member of its own sex. Large numbers of the crabs were heading towards the nearby ocean, but to do so they had to cross the main road. I'm assured that in April, when the main rains come, there are millions of crabs on this road. A living carpet, so I'm told. Already thousands have been squashed, and trying to avoid them was a waste of time. For the lucky ones who make it safely across the road, this is where they're heading, the ocean, to lay their eggs. After spending 2 exciting days with the crabs, I took the bus to Havana, changed buses there at the bus station, and then on to Vinales. Coming down into the Vinales Valley, you get your first sight of the limestone mountains known as Mogotes, which are characteristic of this area. Vinales is a very pleasant town, absolutely crammed with tourists, and still retaining a few of its old colonial buildings. One of the features of Cuba is the abundance of classic old American sedans, and some people come here just to see them. Most of them have, however, been modified with modern diesel engines.
Apa ya, Geng? Boleh kayak nanti ya.
Boleh.
Voila. With the rains about to come, it's time to start cultivating the fields. These workers are planting cassava, also known as yucca. Wherever you look in the valley, there's the looming presence of the limestone outcrops. This is known as karst and has very sharp, knife-like edges. The most popular activity in the area is horse riding amongst the karst formations. Any activity is often accompanied by a sublime song of the northern mockingbird. Although looking like butterflies, this is an Urania moth, which is active in daytime. It's only found in Cuba and nowhere else in the world. With many birds, such as this red-legged thrush, you get just a brief glimpse. By contrast, the tiny little Cuban leaf-green toady is quite confiding and grants you a little more time to watch it and photograph it. On the other extreme, these cattle egrets are completely tame. They accompany the plough, looking for worms and insects. After just 4 days, I had to tear myself away and return to Havana